To go one step further, I think meme coins have benefited other parts of the Raydium stack as well. And namely, most evident example is the concentrated liquidity product. And when you have the amount of taker flows, like organic volume traded, through Raydium pools, and the amount of third-party platforms that are using Raydium's routing program, for example, liquidity providers in other parts of Solana realize that, okay, well, there's a lot of trading volume that's on Raydium that we might not have access to by providing liquidity elsewhere. And so if you look at kind of the Sol USDC, Sol USDT, particularly the 1 basis point, so 0.01% B tier concentrated liquidity pools, that is almost entirely organic and did not exist until a couple of months ago. Those pools now are doing upwards of close to $100 million in volume a day.
This episode is brought to you by Access Protocol. You'll be hearing more from them later in the show. This episode is sponsored by MyPrize, which is the first multiplayer casino where you can watch, chat, and play together with your friends. Use the referral code Lightspeed when signing up to receive a 150% deposit bonus for up to $300. We'll hear more from MyPrize later in the episode. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Lightspeed. I'm Jack Kubanek, your host, and joining me today is 0xInfra, an anonymous, pseudonymous, developer over at Raydium, where he leads the labs entity. Raydium is a DeFi protocol that's been around on Solana for a while, but has been gaining a lot of traction as of late. I find myself writing about it a lot in our Lightspeed newsletter. And so I was messaging 0xInfra and wanted to have him on the podcast, and he agreed. So 0xInfra, thank you so much for joining Lightspeed.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and excited to be here.
Absolutely. I guess I wanted to just start out, you and I haven't gotten to chat a lot outside of Telegram messages about DeFi volume and stuff. So just what do you do? What does your day job entail over at Raydium?
I think a lot of people in this space, it's every day there's kind of a different hat that you can wear. So a lot of it is kind of operational oversight, and so looking at third-party providers, whether that's server side, RPCs, making sure bills are paid, but then some more on the strategy side and thinking about kind of future programmatic development or smart contract development, and also kind of community engagement, marketing, brand positioning, kind of third-party integration. So kind of a lot of it falls under one giant umbrella.
Yeah, you just described a few different job descriptions, it sounds like, but that's the fun of working in crypto, I suppose. I'm glad to have you on today. And the thing that I wanted to lead with is something that there's been some discourse around, and it's how you and I initially had spoken, because we covered it in the Lightspeed newsletter. But it's the Solana DeFi volume that's been really led by Raydium as the largest decentralized exchange in terms of volume. So I'm just going to throw some stats out on the table here, and then you and I can maybe pick them apart, explain them to the viewers, what you're seeing, where these volumes are coming from, that kind of thing. But this is from the Dune Analytics, Solana DEX dashboard from Andrew Hong, I believe. But Raydium has seen $40 billion in volume over the past 30 days. 14 billion of that 40 billion is the Sol USDC pool. For context, 50 to 60% of all Solana DEX volume, decentralized exchange volume, during most of the summer, so that's June until now, we're recording this in early August, has gone through Raydium. And then 60 to 70% of the TVL, if I'm reading the chart correctly, according to this Dune dashboard, is held on Raydium as far as Solana DEXs. So I don't think that would count something like Jupiter. But as far as decentralized exchanges, it's the largest one currently. Over the past 30 days, according to DeFi Llama, Raydium has generated 63 million in swap fees. So just some very large numbers. At the same time that this was happening, there was also this maybe meaningless, but a trend, a milestone, I guess people were pointing out, which was that Solana was passing Ethereum in certain usage metrics. So Ryan Connor, a Blockworks research analyst, pointed out that Solana passed ETH in 30-day trailing DEX volume. So that basically means, over the past month, the volume that went through decentralized exchanges on Solana was greater than Ethereum. So this stat is meaningful because it's not just a 24-hour blip on the radar, but it's, sustained over the course of a month. Dan Smith, another Blockworks research analyst and, my predecessor hosting this podcast, pointed out that in this total economic value TEV stat he created that kind of combines fees and tips, Solana is also getting pretty close to passing Ethereum and its L2s combined, although in the past couple of days that might have shifted. So bear with me. This is all the context. As these charts start to go around, people in Solana are celebrating, maybe dunking on ETH folks a little bit because the metrics were, going in Solana's favor. ETH folks started pointing out that Raydium is kind of the dominant decentralized exchange in Solana. And if you go look at its standard liquidity pools, there were some tokens that had very low volumes, very high volume, very low liquidity. So, tens of millions of dollars in volume over the past 24 hours, but, very little liquidity. Often they might have been some kind of pump and dump on Pump.fun or something like that. And they made accusations that this basically was wash trading, which is when one person will make it look like there are multiple people moving money around to, maybe make their meme coin look more legitimate, get more people to buy it. Often this can be sort of predatory. So excuse my monologue to begin the podcast, but that's sort of the world we're looking at. And so, Infra, I want to just ask you to start out with, you were noticing that Raydium's volumes were hitting all-time highs. Solana DeFi volume in general was up. When you dove into the stats, what did you notice? What was the story that you were kind of seeing there?
Yeah, well, I think first to add like another level of background here is like, I personally, I wasn't taking victory laps about these figures, but I understand why a lot of people on Solana are extremely excited about it. When you think about the amount of progress that Solana DeFi has made in the last 2 years, like this time last summer, Raydium was doing, single-digit $1 million in volume a day. That's from like pre-FTX collapse, where there was in the hundreds of millions of dollars. That's a pretty significant pullback. Raydium's lifetime volume number is 250 billion. And like you said, 40 billion of that has come in the last month. And so, I don't know if the excitement around this and kind of framing it in terms of like the flippening of, Ethereum DeFi is, the best way of going about it. But I do think that like, people being excited about it is no wrongdoing of their own. I will say that kind of like this whole wash trading narrative, or I guess kind of a conversation, kind of caught me a little bit by surprise, especially from some of the people who were like leading the discourse around this. And so it's like, presumably, if they're not LARPs and they've been around the space for a long time, like, they've done some meme coining on Ethereum. They remember the days back from, scrolling DEX tools, new pages, new pools page, a couple of years ago, and just watching these pools spin up on Uniswap, pump a bunch of volume through them. DEX tools had warnings on them about, contract authority and all these other things. And just kind of like watching these things, just like bot versus bot, like literally PvP trading in the first like couple of minutes. And so it's like either people have like a very short memory, or they just kind of the grass is a lot more rotten on the other side. But I guess like kind of I think like I saw like a funny tweet the other day, and it was I think Profit from MetaDown. He had said like crypto Twitter is a lot of like one person digging a hole, 10 people watching them dig a hole, and then 100 people speculating on what that hole is going to And that's just a really cheeky way to say, like, there's a lot of problems going on in this space. And there's a lot of ways that we can improve, but there's, opinions only go so far. And so, if there are suggestions about like, the best way to handle these things, like we're all ears. And, if you're to figure out like, how to discount or discredit like these types of volume metrics or, disincentivize it in any way, keen to chat on it and, in any capacity. But what I will say is Solana, like in any type of low fee environment, like this type of behavior is like one that much more effective from like a cost standpoint. And people are going to do that. And you see that from like, a couple of years ago, like before priority fees on Solana were a thing, where people would just like absolutely spam transactions, and not have any type of, like downside risk, because transaction costs are so low. Digging into the numbers though, and I think that narrative kind of picked off on potentially what was like a bad week, because like I went through Raydium's top pools list today and the numbers are a lot healthier. Like every pool in the top 30, top 40 are multiple $1 million in TVL. They're, tens of millions of dollars in volume traded. But I did kind of like put a tweet out a couple of weeks ago that talks about like, kind of like the incentives behind this. And a big part of it, I think, is these like third-party UIs that people use to find, new meme coins or new pools. They all have like trending token lists, and it's kind of a black box. Like nobody really knows like what goes into those trending token list APIs or like how those are put together. And if volume is a part of that, like you pay a Telegram bot, and they go and wash volume, I guess. But I do not think it's happening in the scale that people are really pointing to. And I do think a more important figure to focus on is that total economic value that you just mentioned and we've talked a little bit about as well.
Yeah, I just on that last point, I think that's an interesting point to flag that I sort of came across during my reporting, but there really is incentive to game some of these trending token lists on meme coin platforms, because there isn't like a TikTok for meme coins where there's as much of a curated algorithm. There's really just, if you go on Pump.fun, like the bump order or whatever, it'll show you a certain amount of tokens. And so there definitely is like an incentive to try to game metrics to try to get on these lists if you're launching a meme coin and you want to make money off of it. I spent a little bit of time digging around. For what it's worth, it seemed to me like there is at least some amount of essentially like volume bots where you can pay somebody to create what looks like organic volume so that you can, maybe make your meme coin project look more legitimate. This probably isn't a great thing, but as you said as well, it's sort of the blessing and curse of Solana being cheap, is that you get more volume, you get more people trying stuff. You also get things like spam because it's just cheaper to run a volume bot and do a lot of, false transactions to make a meme coin look more legitimate. So,
yeah, I was going to just say, like on the subject of spam, right? I mean, after Breakpoint last year, WIF was launched in early November, and that was like, spam now. Like Raydium was getting from like the pool creation side of things at the end of 2023 was like through the roof. We had like pre-Breakpoint we were doing like low 100 pools launched per day, and that number skyrocketed to 7,000, 8,000, and it was consistently happening on like a 30-day period. And what we when you watch this and you see through it, it's like, okay, well some of these pools are people who are deploying liquidity. They're waiting for bots to come in and swap, and they're pulling liquidity. And it is like, for lack of a better word, like a rug pull. And you can go back and you look at the data and you can say, well, what on average are these malicious actors earning on like this pool deployment? And basically what we kind of figured out was like, okay, well, it looks like they're earning about 1 SOL. So how do you increase that upfront cost to them to deter spam? And that was when Raydium kind of put in place like this pool creation fee. And so when you consider like the open book market creation fee that is required to make a Raydium D4 pool, and then adding this pool creation fee on top of it, like you get into this like kind of 1 to 1.5 SOL range. And that was enough to really, 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 really curb that activity. And we've kind of hit a much more sustainable, but like realistic number that's closer to 1,000 pools per day over the last 6 months. And I do think that like a lot of that was cut down, and now we are kind of faced with a new problem, and that's the nature of dealing with permissionless software. And so that's kind of, these things would be great. Like someone can go launch a WIF SOL pool, and that thing can trade to multiple $1 billion. But then anytime something like that happens, like there's going to be an economic incentive for people to come in and try and figure out how to game the system. And so, just wanted to add that.
I want to get your take as well on bots, because there's sort of like discourse going around of, how much volume is bot volume versus organic users that are buying meme coins, doing the things that people do on Solana these days. Like, how do you feel about, a lot of the software that you're creating is used by bots instead of people, but there's also this line of thinking that goes, well, bots are users. Like that's a legitimate use case for this software. It creates revenue for the business. So how do you think about bots, or maybe where do you fall on that debate about, building for bots versus organic users?
Yeah, I mean, this has been something that like not only us, but like I think Solana as a whole has been dealing with for the better part of the last 3 years, and like this goes all the way back to the IDO days of on Raydium, where there's big token launches and people are incentivized to come in and be the first person to swap into that pool. And so there's been a lot of like improvements on kind of like how we handle this. And Raydium did deploy a new constant product market making program like 2.5 months ago. That is, it has some like the simplest change is that like the pool open time is the subsequent block. So like what we're seeing on like the AMM-v4 on some of these launches is people are bundling pool creation and swap transactions in the same in TX. Create the pool, swap on the pool, and then if that is successful, like this token is now considered a launch. If it's not successful, then you just spin it back and you do it with something else. But I do think like bots often do get a pretty bad reputation. And there's like a lot of bots within the ecosystem that do like kind of serve different roles. And so like for Borrow Lens, you have liquidation bots that then have assets on hand that they need to swap in these liquidity pools. And then on the other side, from like, something that users are obviously a lot more aware of is like, pool snipers, MEV, and other types of front running or sandwiching, which is worse. And like we're seeing, I think Helios now they're working on like a new endpoint that has some MEV protection built on top of it. We're seeing like more resources being put into that as well, like whether you're sending transactions via like Jito bundles, but generally using like trusted RPC endpoints. And those are like kind of a couple of different ways. But the long story short is like liquidity begets liquidity. And when you are a pool deployer, your ultimate goal is for people to buy these tokens. And the fact of the matter is on the Raydium V4 pools, which are dominating Solana block space right now, despite there being a newer, better program available, is that there are lots of bots sitting on these pools that mean as soon as the pool is deployed, there's a buyer there. And if you are going out to launch a new token, like that's really what you want.
Fragmentation is a big problem for Ethereum, but also for the subscription industry. We all know the pain of tracking which subscriptions you're paying for and the hassle of trying to cancel them. Well, Access Protocol is here to help with a new way to consume content via staking. It's built on Solana and gives you an easy solution to stay up to date on what's happening in the industry by giving you access to your favorite publishers like CoinGecko, CryptoSlate, and a whole list of independent creators. The ACS token, that's the Access token, is staked to gain access to all of that creator's content without the hassle of managing a subscription. If you want to give it a try, check out the link in the show notes to claim a free NFT that gives you access to a creator's content. MyPrize is the first multiplayer casino where you can watch, chat, and play together with your friends. With over 500 games ranging from slots to live table games to the latest online casino favorites, there's something for everyone. Crypto is at the core of MyPrize, so you can play it anytime, anywhere. Get your friends, hop into your favorite creator's room, and see why winning is better together. Use the referral code Lightspeed when signing up to receive a 150% deposit bonus up to $300. Thanks again to MyPrize for sponsoring today's episode. Okay, so to kind of put a pin in this section, I guess, I do want to ask why Raydium's volume is going up to the extent that I dove into the stats a little bit. Around this time last year, Raydium was kind of in third place, tied for second as far as volume. So the amount of money going through decentralized exchange protocols on Solana. Orca was in first, and it was basically tied with Lifinity. Sorry if I mispronounced that. But to the extent that you've mentioned that some of this is probably wash trading, some of it is bot activity, meme coins. But to your understanding, what's behind the kind of rise in how much of Solana's DeFi volume Raydium is taking in?
Yeah. So in short, I think there's really two big parts of this. And so for one, Raydium has always put a large priority on building permissionless infrastructure, where a lot of teams opted more for kind of a whitelisting procedure through the UI. So what that means basically is just any token can be used to create a Raydium pool. And there's no type of limitation there. And then that token can be directly swapped on Raydium's UI, where some of the aggregators on Solana or other DEXs had some whitelisting procedures in place. The other part of it as well is kind of when the market volume as a whole fell off, at the end, it really throughout 2023 and the first half of really throughout 2023, is there's a big emphasis on kind of capital efficiency, and so doing more with less, and that's really where you saw Orca's whirlpools really outperform. Raydium as well, similar to Orca, has a concentrated liquidity product, but was second to market with that, and so much of the year was spent on kind of playing catch up, and we have seen that gap narrowed significantly. But I think what a lot of people overlooked or did not anticipate is that constant product pools are a great product offering for a lot of different people. And one, from a liquidity provider standpoint, it's very easy. But for two, from a pool deployer standpoint, especially for meme coins, is they're great for long tail assets. They're literally priced from 0 to infinity. The liquidity scales up as the price increases, so it doesn't require that much upfront capital. And then arguably, most importantly, is you can burn those LP tokens, which renounces your ability to claim those from the pool, or claim the underlying assets from the liquidity pool. And almost all of the big token launches on Solana, whether it's things like Boom or Whiff or Popcat or you name it, they elected to deploy in a constant product pool, burn those LP tokens, and users know that the liquidity will be there forever. And so I think it's a combination of permissionless infrastructure, but then also just the simplicity and kind of refining product market fit in a program or a product offering that kind of lost product market fit at one point. And so I think the rebirth of it has been really interesting to watch.
And it sounds like maybe meme coins play a large part in that story, just from the examples you gave. Raydium's use case largely is sort of with being able to seed liquidity for these meme coins, and those have been kind of the story of the recent Solana takeoff in metrics. So I guess that makes sense that those would go hand in hand a bit.
It does, and to go one step further, I think meme coins have benefited other parts of the Raydium stack as well, and namely, the most evident example is the concentrated liquidity product. And when you have the amount of kind of taker flows, like organic volume traded, through Raydium pools, and the amount of third-party platforms that are using Raydium's routing program, for example, liquidity providers in other parts of Solana realize that, okay, well, there's a lot of yield or a lot of trading volume that's on Raydium that we might not have access to by providing liquidity elsewhere. And so if you look at kind of the Sol USDC, Sol USDT, particularly the 1 basis point, so 0.01% fee tier concentrated liquidity pools, that is almost entirely organic and did not exist until a couple of months ago. Those pools now are doing, upwards of close to $100 million in volume a day. And I think that is, so meme coins have been, great for the constant product program or product, but then also really good for bootstrapping liquidity on the concentrated liquidity product, which there's a big focus on for being more competitive on larger volume assets.
So I think we'll pivot there because I do want to get a bit into just sort of Raydium's history a little bit. As far as I could tell in a little bit of podcast due diligence that I did, I don't know if anyone from Raydium has been on a podcast since 2021 or so. And so, with it being, if that's wrong, by the way, do not yell at me.
I did one. It's been a while for me. I'm a little bit camera shy, a little bit stage fright. I suffer from a little bit of stage fright, but I did one a couple, I guess it was maybe last summer. Not as high profile as Lightspeed though.
High profile. It's high profile. You're killing it as well for what it's worth. But either way, it's not a protocol that's on podcasts a lot, and it has a pretty interesting origin story in that there's an FTX connection, as with many things in Solana that have been around for a while. But my understanding is that Raydium was originally a market maker service on Serum, which was the decentralized exchange that FTX built on Solana. So can you just walk me through the early days of Raydium, the FTX connection, and then sort of how you've pivoted in the time since 2022?
Yeah. So I'll try and keep this concise, but Raydium was the first AMM to launch on Solana, and it was the first hybrid AMM as well. And so what is a hybrid AMM? Basically, what Raydium did, in the early days was it would take idle liquidity and a constant product pool and then place orders on whichever the underlying order book market. Previously it was Serum, now it's open book, and place orders on whatever the underlying market was. Those orders would follow basically the base fee tier of the Raydium pool, and then they would be sized and spaced according to the Fibonacci sequence. The hybrid AMM as well, it kind of was it was an aggregator before Jupiter existed, because it could take liquidity from Serum. If the price was better, it could self-arb and keep those prices nice and tight between the two protocols. But ultimately, I think this is a user experience that was really, really, really fun in early 21. Basically, for any given asset, you could paste a market ID into any graphical user interface or GUI, pull up, it would automatically populate all of the open orders. So that'd be bids and asks on the order book itself. And some of those orders would be from the AMM, some of those orders would be from other users, but any user could provide could create a limit order on these pools, and either it gets filled by another user or the AMM could fill that as well. And so that was like very early on. Obviously, post FTX, there were some concerns over Serum, and at that point, Serum was kind of in a different place in the ecosystem as well. Fee changes there was a big reduction in Serum fees. The Serum v3, what was also then forked to become OpenBook v1, was heavily reliant on people, cranking these markets. So topping them up with Sol, running cranks to process consume events and really just make the order book function the way it was supposed to. And so kind of the user experience had kind of taken a step back. At the time of the FTX blow up and then, concerns over Serum, a group of Solana developers, namely Mango Max and a bunch of the other teams at the time, there were several dozen that were using Serum as like an underlying infrastructure, decided to go out and fork it and launch OpenBook. And Raydium migrated all of its new pool creation and also some of the older liquidity pools to OpenBook as well, and they continue that. That is kind of I think of it as kind of like one of the first only possible on Solana projects that a lot of people don't know about. But the reality, yeah, go ahead.
Real quick, can you just explain what OpenBook is?
Yeah, so OpenBook is the community fork of Serum. And so you had all these different DEXs. You had some of the perpetual protocols on Solana that were using it. And it was kind of, the idea was this can be a community-run project that can serve as a foundation or kind of like a base layer for Solana DeFi. And, it's already code complete. It was battle tested. And that was used, pretty heavily throughout 2023. Phoenix, a different order book, was launched, and they kind of they offer different technical solutions to some of the things that OpenBook was working on. But now OpenBook has kind of grown into its own team. It's grown from this community project into something a little bit bigger than that. And they've launched a new build of their order book as well. And that happened the last couple of months.
And the reason that you would fork Serum is that, despite FTX's misdeeds, from what I understand, Serum was, actually pretty good tech. I guess if you're a trader, it worked well. So it was worth trying to have some version of that carry on. Is that the idea?
Yeah, that's the basic idea.
Yeah. Okay. So I cut you off, but you've created order book, and then how does Raydium get to sort of where it is today?
Yeah. So then, so that was I kind of talk about product market fit, and there being kind of 2 or even 3 journeys of Raydium. So kind of the first was this order book integration. It was a differentiating factor. But then kind of with meme coin mania, is what we're calling it, was that a lot of these markets weren't really suitable for an open book or for an order book. And there's some technical components to that we can kind of talk about if it's relevant. But the main thing is these are long tail assets. All of kind of the minimum order size and the tick size for all these orders has to be set up beforehand, and nobody knows that they're ultimately going to be trading at. And the underlying market of the AMM wouldn't be possible to really place orders there in a way that would make sense for a user. And at the same time, OpenBook was deploying its version 2, its V2 program, which is something that's entirely different. So Raydium's AMM v4, the constant product pools that most people are using on Solana, they were changed to pool status 6, which just means that they support native swaps within the pool and native add and remove liquidity transactions, and they're not sharing liquidity anywhere else. So a hybrid AMM can share liquidity; it can also not share liquidity, and so that feature was kind of turned off just because it outgrew its use case.
Yeah, so it's probably pretty difficult to like market make or create liquidity for meme coins. I think is maybe part of that. Like, can you walk me through some of the challenge of fulfilling orders for these very volatile, fly by night, one day of liquidity type of tokens?
Yeah, so I think it's important to remember is that the concert product pools, they're passive market makers. But like the types of orders that like Raydium was placing, either making or taking on OpenBook or on Serum at the time, like they resembled orders that would be filled through an AMM. So it's just kind of taking that tail liquidity and replicating that in some other place. So that if you're using an OpenBook GUI or a Serum GUI, you can see orders there. Or if you're like a protocol that has to run liquidations, you have like order book liquidity that you can use in addition to pool liquidity. And so the sophistication of it wasn't like a what you would see from like a centralized exchange market making strategy. But it did support atomic swaps. And so, if a large swap was coming in on a Raydium pool, it could pull that liquidity from OpenBook and then fill that swap natively within the pool, update price, and then replace orders. And so there used to be a UI that I think this guy Skynet built, and it was called like Open Serum. And you could go in, you could look at any market, and you could see Raydium's orders being placed and replaced in real time, as well as like all other liquidity on these markets as well. And I thought like that was like the easiest way to kind of like see this thing work. And so ultimately we moved away from that. It's an older program on Solana. It's almost 4 years old now, and so it's kind of like it's a pre-anchor program. There's a lot of like really clunky stuff that's inside of this program that has to do with CRM. It has to do with OpenBook, and there's no token 2022 support for it. And so much of kind of the end of 2023 and the first half of 2024. A lot of effort was put into building out a new constant product pool that was more in line with kind of like the current tech standards of Solana, but also would be able to support some of the newer updates, and namely that's token 2022. And so Raydium has like 3 main pools that it offers to users depending on what they're trying to do on Solana for any type of pool creator.
Okay, makes sense. And I'm curious, you sort of in that overview of Raydium gave this kind of narrative where you once were optimizing for the type of trading that was going on Serum, and now today, a lot of the pools on Raydium are meme coin pools. And I'm curious, like from November 2022 to today, at what point did you realize like meme coins are going to drive a lot of activity? Like we really need to optimize for this sort of, user behavior. What was like the point in time where that shift was maybe, made more strongly?
I'd say there's, so one was like, I'd say there's like 3 things. So one I kind of touched on earlier, and that was when we saw pool creation numbers just skyrocket overnight from like a couple hundred to 7,000-8,000. And that like showed, it really, it shined a light on kind of like Raydium's, the DApps infrastructure not being sufficient and scalable for that type of activity. And so like if you were using Raydium at the end of last year, you were using what we call like version 2 of the DApp. And we'd actually been working like for, really a year plus on like the version 3 of the DApp. And we're like, okay, well, like if this has got to get launched and we got to do this immediately. Part of like a lot goes on behind the scenes there where you're working on kind of like, making it just like load scalable for this type of growth. And I'd say like the Raydium V2 app was kind of like the leaning tower of Pisa built on a bowl of spaghetti. It was like teetering on the point of like basically being unusable based off of the amount of stress it was under. But the other part of it as well is like meme coins for I think like a lot of program development, like they break stuff. And so in particular, like a lot of times they have a lot of decimals. And so like when an AMM is initially designed to support token A and token B with like 6 decimals in each or 5 decimals in each, those two numbers are then determine like what the LP token is going to look like, and like what that and so like there's all this like math that's happening when you're interacting with these programs, and it's like when you come in with token A and token B and they both have 15 decimal places, like it throws everything out of whack. And so I think like the first time that really happened was actually it was pre that November 2023. It was really like around the Bonk launch. So early 2023, and there was kind of like an initial mini meme mania that happened post Bonk, and then it's come in waves throughout most of the year, and then at the start of 2024, it really picked up and has not, up to this point, in my opinion, shown really any signs of slowing down.
Did you say the leaning tower of Pisa on a bowl of spaghetti?
Yes, yeah, basically that's how.
Was that off the dome? I've never heard that.
It's kind of a joke that like we've been using internally, and so that's just to say, like if you haven't used Raydium in a while, go check out the new version of the D app. It's a faster, it's a better, it's a smoother user experience. The horror days of Raydium V2, like those are past us now. Go try out the new D app and try it for yourself. Quoting on Swass is extremely fast. Pool's page is super snappy. It's everything's been rebuilt back end to front end, and so yeah.
Okay, I couldn't let us just skate over that that metaphor or whatever it was, but yeah, it's interesting. I have made this comparison before. I have to write a lot about meme coins in the Lightspeed newsletter, and so think about them a fair bit. And it's always interesting to hear the kind of infrastructure that goes into them, because it's like this very complex trading infrastructure and all sorts of things is built so that people can like put $10 into buying a thing with a picture of a dog. And it's just funny how, you wouldn't think that there's a ton of technical complexity. I'm at back home in Kentucky right now, the home of bourbon. And it reminds me of, there's so much work that goes into distilling liquor. Like it's a very complex process, can take years, and someone might like take a shot of liquor after you put all this work into creating it. And so it's funny how it's like, there's, taking the spaghetti out from under the Tower of Pisa took a long time for Raydium to do. And for most people, they're just loading some USDC into the protocol to speculate on meme coins. But I want to dive into another aspect now that we're, have fully gone into the kind of meme coin side of things. One partnership that I'm sure has driven a lot of users to Raydium has been Pumpfun. So, the kind of viral app of 2024 in the first half, you could maybe say. It has this feature where you can launch, a meme coin for $2 on Pumpfun, very low risk. And if it reaches a certain amount of liquidity on this bonding curve, so like basically if enough people buy the token, some of that liquidity is then put into a Raydium pool, and then you can swap it on Raydium, is how I understand it. So I guess just to maybe begin, like I'm curious to hear the inside story of how that partnership between Pumpfun and Raydium came together. I
think these guys really just love meme coins. and when you look at kind of the amount of resources that they put into making like this meme coin creator experience more exciting, it's, you know, like there's everyone has an opinion on Pump.fun, and when you're a protocol that's doing that's as successful as they are, I think you're going to have people who are largely, it's going to be polarizing. But it's like, you know, they put in this, like they launched live streaming for people who want to deploy a meme coin. And like, that is, I think it's pretty wild. I don't have a lot to say on kind of like the origin story of it. But I've used Pump, I've run through some of the numbers. I have spoken to them and been introduced, and I think they're like they definitely know what they're doing, and they're working hard to make sure that like they can corner the meme coin market to the best of their ability. But yeah, I think Pump has been a great kind of protocol that's like used like the Raydium underlying pool infrastructure to do something different. And kind of the knee-jerk reaction I think from a lot of people is like, oh, all of your volume comes from Pump.fun, and kind of the reality is that like a lot of these tokens, actually like the vast majority, close to 99% of them, don't ever make it to Raydium. And the ones that do, they typically do, you know, a lot of volume out of the gate. And then some of those sustain that volume, some of them don't. But what Pump.fun really is it's kind of like they've solved one, like the initial kind of like bot problem where like now people have the ability to buy these tokens before there is a launch and then a pool sniper or something that you're competing against on a UI. But it also serves as kind of like a litmus test for these assets as well. And so once a given meme coin hits a certain maturity level, then that pool is launched. And it kind of like inadvertently is a pretty big spam filter for what pools ultimately do get listed on Raydium. And so like I really like having them, and I'm glad that they chose Raydium to launch this product.
Interesting. And I remember like we were messaging on Telegram and you mentioned something along the lines of like the majority of trading always happens on the first day, and then by the second and third day on these meme coins, it's trailed off. Like, what have you seen data wise as you've been watching sort of the Pumpfun Raydium tokens come in?
Yeah. So this was data taken a couple of weeks ago. Typically, like, and so a lot of people are talking about like capital dispersion and dilution in this space, and so kind of like people hopping from one thing to the next and doing it, you know, very quickly. And for like, there's staying power for some assets and there's less staying power for others. And so kind of like the general trend at least has been, you know, really high sustained volume in the first 24 to 48 hours. And that volume, outside of a few outliers, dying off after that period, trending, you know, down pretty significantly. But then like, you know, there are some assets that for whatever reason start to pick up volume again. But kind of trying to look at these things in aggregate and get a better idea of kind of like how the market is working.
I guess I want to ask you as well, you know, you're someone who, you know, your day job is a lot of creating this infrastructure and it's primarily used to trade meme coins is, you know, if you dive into the data, what you see. So I'm just curious to get your take as someone in that position. Like, how do you feel about meme coins? What do you think of this trend?
So I'd like to preface this with saying like, this is probably like some of the most fun I've had like on Solana in a while. And I think that like, you know, meme coins, like they've extended beyond just like DEXs in general. And there's You're now seeing these in like borrow lens and other DeFi primitives. You're seeing like, teams build out infrastructure to short these things, or, you borrow against them, do whatever you want. I think like I kind of share the view that I think a lot of people do, is that like they're a great way to participate in like different social movements or metas. And I think that like society itself is like every single day giving, like there's just there's like a fire hose of content that can be just like spit out these things. And so I think from like a longevity standpoint, they're probably here to stay. Whether that is, at current rates, no, I don't think anyone really knows the answer. But I share kind of like sentiment that a lot of people do in this space as well, where it's like, a lot of this is PvP kind of like trading style. And there are, clearly, if like wash trading is a problem that we've discussed, that there's going to be people who lose money on them. And so like, I don't know. I think it's something that I don't think anyone's really figured out yet. In general, like if I were to sum it up, I would say if it's a yes or no question, I am pro meme coins. But it's a yes and or a yes but.
Yeah, I think yes, like people tend to lose money on meme coins. I would say don't like day trade them if you're not willing to lose whatever you're investing. I guess if I had to make a case for them, Ryan Connor, one of the Blockworks research analysts, I chat with him about this sometimes, is that people lose money sports betting, but sports betting platforms do a ton of revenue. So it's not like you need to be making money necessarily for people to have fun all the time. I am curious, and it'll be something to watch to see if meme coins can like make it into a bear market, because we've really only seen the kind of Pumpfun world in a world where prices are going up. There's more and more addresses being added, but say the current market shakeout extends, say we're entering a bear market. I don't know if we are. I'm not going to make that prediction, but it'll be interesting to watch. Like, are meme coins something that are going to continue to be a thing if we, enter worse market conditions, or is this really a bull market phenomenon? I think it's an open question.
Yeah, and I've been chatting about this with people as well, and I do think that like volume numbers, in any bear market, the general expectation is that volume numbers fall off. But I see a world where there is still sustained new token launches or meme coin launches, but just the attention might not be what they are getting right now. And that kind of goes back to like just a fire hose of content that people can create these things on. If you're on the brink of World War III, but if you go on like any choose your social media app, there's still going to be your general Web 2 memes being created about any number of things that's happening in the world. And I do think that there's a place where meme coins aren't just like a purely speculative vehicle, but also kind of I circle back to having been in this space for a while now, thinking about token launches in general are new assets, and those that are launched in a bear market a lot of times really do outperform in a bull. And I think that part of the reason why meme coins have garnered so much attention in this cycle is that a lot of people are have grown a little bit tired of high FTV governance token launches. And a better way to get beta to the L1s that you might be using or trading is to hold a widely dispersed, fully diluted meme coin with, for example. And I do think that there will be, in a bear market, I do think there will be more of those. And so that's kind of where I fall on the aisle.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I mean, personal bias, I'm not super interested in meme coins. I don't own any in like a serious way outside of buying them for writing the newsletter or something like that. So, that's where I fall. But I do think that were I to kind of play it out a little bit, I think that meme coins haven't been fully explored necessarily. Like the infrastructure people are using to trade them is not super fleshed out. There was this new app that came out the other week that I'm forgetting the name off the top of my head, but you can, buy meme coins with fiat using a credit card, and stuff like that just now exists. You also could think about something like, instead of these trending token lists we talked about that incentivize people to game volumes, what if you had better algorithms, like a For You page type algorithm for meme coins? So, if it is something you believe in, I guess there's more infrastructure to be built, probably. But it remains an open question. I guess either way, there is the saying that, the way to make money in a gold rush is to sell picks and shovels. And Raydium definitely is, in the picks and shovels business. But I guess, maybe somewhere to kind of conclude things is I'm curious. We've talked a little bit about where things go from here. Right now, it's a meme coin world on Solana still. Say like meme coins decline, say people aren't as interested in trading them anymore in, 3 to 6 months. Where would Raydium be headed next? What are kind of the thoughts as to, what are the promising business lines post meme coins?
Yeah. So this is like something ideally that is going to come out in a little bit more of a formal setting in the next couple of months, but kind of really looking at like further decentralization components of the D app, and particularly kind of like focusing on various like kind of program authorities. And so I don't want to get into it too much right now, just because the timing on it is kind of undetermined. But it's basically like a hub and spoke governance model that's built into the Raydium D app, that has both kind of like liquidity mining gauges and bribing, but then also levers that can be incrementally changed in various time intervals for different things on the protocol itself. And that can be kind of like a global emissions rate, or the pool creation fee, or percent of token buybacks to burns, or potentially fee switches and that type of thing. And so that's kind of like a bigger picture project that's been in the works for a while, that kind of like removes and lets like kind of the free market kind of decide where these things should be balanced, and ideally kind of like iterate from there on that side. But I do think that like there is a lot of room for like continued support on like the borrow lending side, especially for like longer tail assets and assets that have deeper liquidity. Raydium is also like a pretty big Oracle provider, or publisher rather, on Solana for a lot of these assets as well. And so there's continued work that goes on there. And so that's just kind of high level. But the other part is kind of like, and I think, so we're talking on Tuesday. Yesterday, I think we might be calling it Black Monday. One of the things I just mentioned was like, kind of something that involves liquidations. The other one that involves liquidations is obviously perpetuals. On days like yesterday, it's great and feels awesome to just be comfy and spot, especially from like a protocol level where you don't like have to worry about being stuck with bad debt or liquidations or anything of that sort. And so So yeah, and then I guess one other thing is kind of building out additional tooling for pool creators. So that's kind of like lock LP functionality, kind of the potential to separate fees from LP tokens, and allowing pool creators to kind of like burn that underlying stake and continue to earn fees. But then been playing around the last week plus with launching new fee tiers for these pools as well, and so kind of like continuing to grow that, like the liquidity providing side of things. So yeah,
makes sense. Cool. Well, look. Unfortunately, we are at time, but Infra, I really appreciate you coming on Lightspeed today. It's been really interesting to see the kind of moment that Solana is having in DeFi, and some of those metrics just really creeping up as far as users and things like that. And Raydium is right in the middle of it. So I think listeners are really served to get a little bit of, what's going on behind the scenes at Raydium, a little bit of your story. And it's been a really fun conversation. Thank you so much for coming on, man. Take care.